Hey, Composing Gloves here, and today we're going to be approaching a super big topic. It is circular chord progressions. Why is it a big topic? There's going to be a lot in this video that will go right over your head if you're not solid on the basics. You need to know the circle of fifths. You need to know the circle of fourths. You know how you go in one direction, it's fourths, other direction, it's fifths. You need to know your major scales. You need to know like the 1, 5, 6, 3, 2, that kind of thing, what they are in the major scale. We're going to be talking a little bit about minor chords. What is this topic? It is circular chord progressions, and this is a combined video with the Midi music theory people and the music theory from the ground up people. Why? Because I feel like this is a good platform to share it on. It's not really necessary to write out the music because we're going to be talking about the 1, 5, 3, 2, all that stuff. Circular chord progressions is the topic, and what is cool about this is we are now going to give context to how to create a chord progression, at least a stereotypical, like acceptable classical tonal chord progression. And it sort of will give you new light to some of these other concepts that we've explored. We've got a bit of backbone to now approach this. Now, this will also allow us to use the 2 chord and the 3 chord in their sort of standardized usage. I will say something that you should be aware of. When we talk about moving in the circle of fifths and fourths, as we're going to shortly, we are looking at chordal movements, not like movements by themselves, as in like single note movements. So you could use different inversions of the chords and it would still be considered a fifth movement. There are a couple weird cases, but we're just going to ignore those. I'm also going to ignore part writing rules for the most part. And we're just going to be looking at understanding this sort of a concept. And we're going to be learning this. This is going to be a diatonic thing. So there's one thing that I'll point out when we get to it for you Midi music theory people who will be a little like that might not make a lot of sense. And the reason would be is because on the staff and other modes of thinking, i.e. sheet music writing, it makes way more sense. But on the piano roll, they don't have like the easiest method of deducing it unless you're like super amazingly good at your scales, which, of course you are, right? Because you've studied your scales. Now we're going to be moving in C major. So it should be a scale that you're comfortable with. Most people are, most comfortable with C major. It seems to be the easiest one to work with. Okay, so just so you know, like that's all that stuff's going to sort of build up here. What is the point of a circular chord progression? What does that even mean? Well, we talked about the circle of fifths and fourths, right? We talked about them chromatically. So, like how to determine them. Go watch the video if you're not totally like clear on that, because you need to know those and you need to know the intervals. Like you should be able to just rattle them off like C to G, G to D, D to A to E, E to B. You should just be able to do that. You just think about it. Now, what's cool about this is we determined with the authentic cadence that the 5-1 was the perfect authentic cadence. That is the most final sounding. That's like the strongest relationship. The reason is it's got a couple of what are called, oh my gosh, I forgot what they're called. Tones, dissonant tones, not leading tones. There's some kind of tone. Pulling tone. Dang, I can't remember right now. But anyways, these tones, there's 2 of them, and the 5 that pull to the 1 that resolve quite nicely. So what's great about this is what we need to take away from this is 5-1 is like a really strong chord progression. So we're like, hey, why don't we do this diatonically in a scale? This would mean that we would have only strong progressions as we get to the 1 chord, because the ultimate goal, this is a major idea, the ultimate goal of a chord progression is the tonic triad. You want to get there. Like it is what you want. And if you want it to sound really done, you do the root position. The root position, not the first inversion. And now keep in mind the cadential 6/4 video. Watch that one if you're not totally sure what I'm talking about, because remember that's not a suitable resolution point, because that would resolve better to the 5 chord. So this will allow you to use some of these chord progressions we've talked about in a more useful manner. So we understand that the 5-1 is this powerful thing. It's like, whoa, my gosh, like this is the thing that gave the princess the power to kiss the frog and turn him into the prince. It was the 5-1 chord progression. Didn't you know that? So that's how it works. Okay, so putting that aside, there's sort of a convention that we have going on here. When you are descending, you will use fifths. So you're going down in fifths, da 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 da. So you'll notice that's what I've done here. We have C to G. So C to G is a fifth, G to D, fifth. Here's another fifth, fifth, fifth. And now this is where your MIDI music theory people might not get it as fast as the music from the ground up people, at least if you like really know your stuff. This is a diminished fifth. This is not a perfect fifth. Why is it like that? Well, if you do this diatonically for long enough, you will end up with a diminished fifth. If you're going backwards, you'd get an augmented fourth. So because we're moving in fourth, so it'd be an augmented fourth. So that's just something that'll happen diatonically. For the most part, it's just simply ignored. There are some part writing rules where like you avoid stuff like that, and there's a number that also affects your use of the 7 chord. But that's like, who needs that stuff right now? Like, not us. So okay. Let's look at this. Okay, now if you notice we go backwards, here's that augmented fourth, and then we have fifth, fourth, 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 fourth. Okay, so that's like really an interesting thing. Way cool gloves, dude. What does this have to do with me? Well, look at that. Well, remember the plagal cadence, how nice that sounded? And it's in one of the most popular chord progression ever. It's a plagal cadence. And then remember the authentic cadence? Remember how nice that one was? Well, hey, what if we use those not as a final destination, but as a movement inside our progression? That was the idea, okay? So let's say, for example, so here, look at this. We have C to G, right? That's our 5-1. So if we go 5, 1. That sounds pretty nice. Cool. Okay, cool. Well, now we could go the other way. We go in fourths. So they resolve back. We go back and forth. This is one of the reasons why 5-1, 1-5, 5-1, inversion 1-5, all these things, like they just go back and forth. They're just so convenient and they sound really nice and consonant. Now, what if we go back another step behind the fifth on our chord progression? Well, hey, look at this. We have our 1 chord, our 5 chord, and then the 2 chord. We haven't really used the 2 chord. At least we haven't really looked at its typical application. So like conventionally, this is the 2 chord. Like, welcome to the 2 chord. What's cool about the 2 chord is this is what it pulls to. Because look at this. This 2 chord will pull really nicely to the 5 chord because of the fifth, well, in this case, the fourth relationship that they're sharing. Vice versa, we could go the other way and go 5-2. So we could go 1, 5, 2. And now that sort of leaves us with motion to go, sort of somewhere else. But backwards, if we start on 2 and then go 5 and then 1. Now I'm staying all root position right now. I may occasionally throw in inversions. Remember, we're looking at chords. So just because a different note is in the bass does not change the sequence of fifths. It's not the same thing as the inversions themselves. Like if you're picking up what I'm putting down. So yeah, so that's how you use the 2 chord. Like there it is. Whoa. Now this right here forms a fundamental jazz progression. It's called the 2-5-1. So I'll probably talk about it at some point here, but yeah, so that's how you use the 2 chord. Like, look at that. Now that's the conventional way. Of course, you get crazy and break all the rules and do whatever you want and like throw a baby out a window. Like, it's up to you what you want to do with the 2 chord. Hopefully not throwing babies out of windows, at least without a helmet, because that'll make it safer. So, okay, so look at this. Well, why don't we just keep going? Well, look at it here. Ooh, look at that. It's the 6th chord, the A. That A, ooh, buddy. That's how you use the 6th chord conventionally. So here's the 6th chord. And it says, hey, my best option, as if we're going up, is going to be a D chord. So we're like, oh, okay, we'll accommodate that. So there's our D chord. Now you notice I inverted there. And then it's like, hey, I'm a D chord, and that's the 2. And we want to go to the 5 chord because that's a 4th. So I'm like, oh, okay. And then the 5 chord's like, hey, dude, man, bro, go to the 1 chord. And then I'm like, dude, man, bro, that was a good move. So you can see here, are you picking up what I'm putting down? People sort of make this out to be magical, but this also has a huge number of implications that is sort of magical. Because if you could see all the relationships and you get into parallel minor scales and relative minor scales, because here we have a number of options available to us as far as shifting scales, this is all stuff that you kind of just have to see the relationships as you're writing your chord progressions. But whenever you carry out a sequence in this manner, so we're going up right now, up this progression, so we get, this nice 4th movement. Sounds really good. This will create the charged direction. You could veer away from it for a little bit, but you want to be careful because you want to come back because then it will create you'll have more dynamic punch in that direction. So then we come to the E. Now this is the 3 chord. This guy is used not so often. He's quite a good deal away from the 1 chord, but he does work out quite nicely. He fits into this progression sort of like the other guys. So here we have the E chord. So we have E, A, D, G, C. Oh, I'm sorry. That's a 6/4. So let's do one more time. So A, E, D, G, C. See that there's the second inversion C chord. Go watch the 6/4 cadential 6/4 video if you're like curious about why that didn't sound done. Okay, so all right, so we've got the 3 in there. Now, the 3, again, is a little less common, and you could do a whole variety of things. Like, for example, this 2 to 5, well, this 5 can go 2. So it could go back and forth. Like, you could try shifting around. You could go major, minor. You know, you could screw with things, you know, leave the general realm of rules. Okay, so we have E, and then we get to this thing right here. Now, this is the 7 chord. The 7 chord is where the logic of this sort of breaks down a little bit. I want you to listen to how close the 7 chord sounds like the 5 chord. So the 7 chords often is like in the authentic cadence. You could substitute a 7 chord for a 5 chord, and that's kind of what it's used for. So listen to this. Here's the 7 chord, and here's the 5 chord. Now listen to how nicely they both resolve to the 1. So 7. That sounds really like that's pretty strong. Now, if I did the inversion of it, so they sound outrageously similar, literally a whole step apart, because they both share B and D and the tonic key of C and the diatonic key. I guess all keys are diatonic, but in the key of C major. So when we get to the 7 chord, it doesn't necessarily go to the 3, it goes to the 1. So here, instead of going up our ladder, we go whoop all the way to the 1 chord. Like, screw the rest of those chords, go straight to the 1 chord. So that's why the 3 chord, you know, sort of a little, if you could toss it in there and get some interesting results, especially if you look at all those 7th videos that we went over. I don't know why I shook my finger at you, but I remember talking about that and all the suggestions I gave in those videos. This will allow you to sort of toss some of those suggestions in and maintain, you know, a nice sounding cool chord progression. Okay, so that's the one. And then you get to this last one, remember, because now we have this weird thing, the augmented fourth. And so from F, which is right here, this is an augmented fourth. Okay. So I just had a moment right there. Ooh, I don't even know what that was about. When we get to the 4th, it's because the 4th is so crazy. When you get to the 4th, you're like, well, what the heck if this diminished? Oh, let's talk about the 7 for one more thing. Okay, so conventional use of the 7 chord. When you get to the 7 chord, typically it is in the, if you know figure bass, it is in the first inversion because there is a major 6th and a minor 3rd on top of each other. At least I believe that's how it works, because you get an augmented 5th in one and an augmented 4th in the other. I could be wrong. I'm going off the top of my head right now. I know I should know my intervals better. I'm always screaming at you guys over that. But the reason is that's the reason why it was almost exclusively used in the first inversion, because it was the only time in which it was consonant, because they hated dissonance. Anything that even sounded remotely like, you think like, you know, dissonance, man, these people could like pull dissonance, like, man, whatever, you would think it sounded consonant, but these people, very dissonant. So that was what the 7 chord was used for in context most of the time. So it wasn't this. They didn't use it. I mean, they could if you used it as a resolve. As a substitute, this would be a substitute for the 5 chord, but they would use it in the first inversion. So they'd use it like this. So that would be the inversion that they used, because yeah, you have a minor 3rd and a, what is that? A major 6th. So yes, so that's the 7 chord, just so you're a little more clear on also another use that was typically used for that chord. Okay, back it up or go down one more to the F chord. So here, this is the plagal cadence. Okay, so we know about the plagal cadence. We're sort of familiar with this idea of a plagal cadence. So this resolves quite nicely. So you could go screw the rest of this, bang, right to the C chord. Now, I forgot if I talked about it, because this is like the 3rd time I've attempted to shoot this video without like going off on some weird tangent. And here, the D chord is the predominant chord. What is a predominant chord? I'm going to really quick say it again just in case I didn't do it. So in G, G is the dominant chord. Well, a chord that will emphasize the transition, holy cow, transition to the G chord or the dominant chord, whatever the 5 chord is called a predominant chord. You know, it makes the resolution stronger. And so by sort of waiting around on this chord, it sounds, you know, it just pulls. It pulls better than. It's not quite as, you know, drawn out. So this is called a predominant chord. When you see this is a method to make more interesting chord progressions. So when you get to the F will be used to extend the predominant chord. So you could go F to C, which would be a plagal cadence, or look at this. What are the notes in the D minor chord? You're right. They're D, F, A. Congratulations. What are the notes in the F major chord? F, A, C. F and A are shared by both of these chords. So you could easily get from the 4 chord to the 2 chord, and then you could pull a move. So you could, you know, slip one past people and then go on past there. You could also go 5. You could go to the 4 chord. Then you could slip up to the 2 chord, and then you could substitute the 5 chord for the 7 chord because of those things we talked about earlier. And then this chord could be used to jump up to the 1 chord. And you have, you know, inversions, melody, all these things are like available tools to you. So that is circular chord progressions. Those are typical uses of the 2, 3, 7, 6, you know, that is typically your progression. If you follow this progression, you will come up with, you know, a chord progression that works. It will be charged. It'll move in a direction. You will arrive at the hotel of your dreams where they have DAWs and musical instruments galore. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but like, I want to be, if I have a hotel of my dreams, going to have my wife there. But anyways, I'm not married yet, but one day when it's there, if I'm not married yet, then the hotel of my dreams will, then I'll meet my wife there. That's like how it works. So yeah, that's circular chord progressions. I think I explained it in a way, I got this hand movement thing going on. I think I explained it in a way that's pretty understandable. So let's just play like an example. So let's say I want to start on the 3 chord because I want to be a cool bro dude. One other thing, back it up. One other thing, if you can go forwards in that direction, you can generally just go, you can also go the other direction and hop around. So you can pull all sorts of moves. And you got borrowed chords and relative minor and parallel minor, which are borrowed chords, and all these other tools available to you. Before I play an example, let me really quick explain one other thing, which is the 3 chord. The 3 chord becomes more important in the minor scales. And all you have to do to really discover about the minor scales is write out a minor scale with the same sort of idea and just look at the relationships that happen. That's literally how this works, is you just look at the relationships. If you look at these relationships, like, hey, this 5-to-1 thing started there and then it got like crazy. As you can see, you started talking about, well, then we could do this and go over here and then do that and then do this. And the same thing applies for all the other scales. So maybe one day I'll explain some of those, but this is like a rundown of like chord progression 101. I know I've been throwing out regular chord progressions, but now you see sort of some of the reasons why some work better than others, the cadences that apply. If you combine it with phrasing and rhythm and all these other things, you start creating something that's pretty darn cool. So, and we haven't even talked about sevenths. You could add in sevenths, but honestly, sevenths are like a whole nother topic. I just recommend looking at the property of a 7th chord that you're interested in using, and then deliberately going out and using that 7th chord until you get comfortable with its usage. And then you could use more and more and more. Cause like, yeah, it gets crazy, dude. So, okay, let's look at an example. So we'll start on the 3 chord just because, you know, 3 chord, you know, not used as much because it's so far away from that 1 chord. But we'll go, you know, 1. So we'll go 3. Then we'll go to the 2. We'll go backwards. See, it resolved on the 3 that time, and I can remember a chord progression that resolves on a 3, but I don't believe I did that one. So we'll go to the 1. This is kind of a weird thing, but that was also at the end. So you see, if we go around using this sort of system, we can, you know, create chord progressions like at the wazoo. It's like a pretty cool thing. If you have any questions about this, let me know, drop a comment. No, it's kind of a lot to swallow, but once you get it, it's like, ooh, man, this is sort of like the magic sauce. And you could still modulate to different keys. The same system applies there. So you just have all these options. Everything is essentially ripping off this system to one degree or another until you get into like really weird crap where they're like, there is no key. Forget the idea of a key, but we're not going into weird crap. We're going into just regular harmony. Harmonious harmony. Subscribe. Share this video with someone that you think would be interested in maybe learning how to improvise. Like this, honestly, if you know how to build chords and you know your scales, you are in a position to understand this for the most part, unless you don't know your cadences, which I threw in there. But it should be pretty straightforward. And have a blessed day. Here it is. So that's it. And now if I add in all the extra jazz. So it's a pretty cool sounding sort of thing, and you can mix it however you want.